Hey guys, so this is keys to making blockchain profitable. So who am I, and why me? So I'm Kyle Thomas. I'm the founder of Provide. Provide is a platform that makes deploying distributed blockchain networks and decentralized applications easy for the first time. And Provide, we recently conducted an enterprise study with Aprio and Emory called the State of the Enterprise Blockchain. And so what we found was that security is the #1 driver currently for adopting blockchain technology. And the reasoning behind this adoption is folks really like the security and the immutability of blockchain. They like that it's cryptographically secure, and they're wanting to leverage this to automate processes, business processes, with a focus on operational efficiency. Today we're going to talk about business process automation, authentication, and payments as some of the, as kind of the sectors that are kind of use case rich. So first is business process automation. So traditionally, like businesses like are very siloed, and they automate processes in silos. But it's in reality, common marketplaces are a lot more efficient. And so decentralization, ironically, creates a centralized environment for record keeping between parties that are collaborating in a business process. And this creates a lot of efficiency over the traditional way to collaborate. So let's take the E. coli outbreak that broke last April. There 210 people in 36 states were infected with E. coli. And this resulted in significant disruption to the commodities market during that time. So basically, like farmers got hit pretty hard. Like the cost declined 45%. Fast food restaurants, if they were lucky, only lost $4,000, but could have lost up to 1.9 million from this outbreak. And the cost of the passed down to the consumer was $3 billion. Or that's typically what annually, from these kinds of outbreaks, the U.S. can spend up to $3.1 billion. So the problem here is really traceability in the supply chain. It's very complicated. Like when lettuce comes from a farm and it gets packaged in a processor, and then it gets shipped to a distribution center where it's sorted, and then it gets put on a truck, and then it goes to the store where you buy it. There's a lot of it changes hands so many times. There's like 5 entities there that could be handling this packaging or handling these products. And so you don't really know who dropped the ball in the traditional, if you're just managing the business process traditionally, you have no idea. But if you distribute the business process, and we're going to talk about Walmart specifically, essentially they with blockchain, they were able to reduce the amount of time it took to trace products from 7 days to like 2 seconds, which is many orders of magnitude. And so essentially, Walmart's able to save $3 million a year because they adopted blockchain. And they're definitely not alone. Like lots of big companies are starting to use blockchain, even though they may act like they're not sometimes. So another use case aside from business process automation is authentication. So traditionally, like you have like the passport system where you can easily forge documents. It's very centralized. You can imitate. You could create a fake passport. Blockchain-based authentication has a real promise where it's cryptographically secure. It's very impossible to forge, and so that's another application. So in terms of authentication, the problem that we can solve is data breach. I think the average cost per record of a data breach is like $148 or something. And if you're hit with a data breach, it's like you have a quarter chance to get hit with one again within the next couple of years. And companies that react quickly to a data breach save $1 million. If they react properly and contain it within 30 days, they're likely to save at least $1 million. So consider Facebook authentication, but without Facebook. Facebook authentication is pretty good in theory. It's really easy, and you don't have to remember tons of passwords. But it breaks down. You're giving your data away, and you're losing control. You're just kind of living on hopes and prayers at that point when you use Facebook authentication. With blockchain authentication, if you centralize or if you standardized with blockchain to manage your authentication for systems, you're kind of adopting a privacy by design approach. And I think it feels very related to the GDPR and CCPA laws that are very much in effect, or with CCPA coming into effect. So what we're proposing here is that applications don't own your data. They actually need permission from you explicitly to use it. And so this is kind of the concept of sovereign identity a bit. And it's going to take some time to shift this paradigm. The big corporations will definitely resist this, but it's privacy by design architecture has a lot of promise. And so there's other applications, for blockchain, IoT, asset tokenization. We've seen projects that are actually governing IT infrastructure. Medical records is pretty common. And so, for the IT infrastructure, there's elasticity by contract, where you can actually govern out how your deployment of your application's architecture actually works. You could use multi-signatures. It's very much like the EVM. You can not like the EVM. You can really have a lot of security around how you're deploying resources in your organization. It's pretty cool. And the project I'm referencing is anticipating $1 billion in savings because of adopting this technology in their IT infrastructure. So payments is another point of interest. It's probably gotten the most attention so far. Traditionally, banks just take money. Every time they move money around, they just take money out. There's no transparency. The efficiency of blockchain absolutely will reduce fees in the banking industry. It's coming. Lowering the cost 5 basis points on global remittances could save $18 billion a year. There's just so much bloat in the current system. And average, it's over 10% to move money between yourself and a family member abroad. 10.5%. So on the merchant side, similar story with credit cards. It's just really heavy in cost. Consumers have to pay annual fees and interest. Merchants, there's just fee after fee after fee. And it's just really broken, for cross-border payments, you have to send money to banks that send money to other banks that can finally talk to the bank that you're trying to send the money to, which is ridiculous. Funds availability is just delayed for days upon days. So with cryptocurrency, though, as we know, we are removing a lot of the parties, we're just getting rid of a lot of the banks. Or really, we're getting rid of almost all of the banks. There's still a money transmitter in the middle, but the fees are typically less than 1%, which is highly efficient and it's instantaneous, more or less. So there's still an adoption problem, though, with cryptocurrency payments. And a lot of that's related to the volatility, the price volatility. Part of it's related to usability. And there's like just lack of support generally, like just basic customer support even, and that's kind of prevalent today even in like the large crypto payment companies. So I think with adoption or with a bit better usability, adoption will improve. So how do you go forward and like attempt to adopt this technology? Like we talked about a few, the business process automation, the payments, the authentication. How do you actually like wrap your head around this to leverage this technology? Because everyone's talking about it. It's way better to like get started and if you have, if you can see a path to value, like how do you go down this path? Like it's really hard, to adopt the technology, and there's no interoperability between systems, and so these are sort of the problems with the adoption, and how do we create a better user experience if the developer experience is so bad? So we have a platform. So I'm not up here to shill my company, but there are some platforms that are coming out that help you do this, and they make it a lot more straightforward to adopt the technology with your existing teams. So like if you have a business, you're not going to tell your developers to stop building the business to learn how to build blockchain applications. A solution exists to make blockchain a tool in the toolbox, which is kind of what's needed in order to extract the $3 million if you're Walmart. In their case, they leveraged the IBM Hyperledger project. So basically, a certain project that I know of is working on building a lot of open source components that allow you to automate the provisioning of these networks. So you can like spin up a global blockchain network in seconds and just have instant enterprise performance, like million transaction per second throughput on any underlying blockchain, which is very helpful if you want to adopt the technology very quickly. And so here's a few quotes from some folks that have used the platform. Shout out to Michael Tidwell. So let's talk. Or does anyone have any questions so far? Say that again.
I talk about the Devops, and then you talk about TABConf, and then security compliance ops. The second question is, what about you talk about the blockchain adoption? What about full potential like email adoption? So back to 80s, would you make a comment about how long it will take?
Yeah, I think we're about 6 years. Okay, so the question was, kind of relate blockchain adoption to the internet and email adoption. And so, yeah, we're about 6 years early. It takes so long for these behaviors to like really take root. I think that we're based on our findings from the study we did. I think we're about 6 years out from true mainstream adoption. I think 2025 we'll see mainstream adoption of blockchain in the enterprise. I believe it's projected to be like a $50 billion market in 2025. And it was only $1.8 billion last year. So there's a lot of room for growth, and it kind of illustrates just how early we are. So I think that it's just a matter of getting just getting education out there. Like enterprises have to be aware of the business value that they can create. Another thing I would say is there's something to be said about how to make blockchain ubiquitous. Like ubiquity can happen in a couple of ways, but I think blockchain adoption will accelerate when there's a killer application that's built that leverages the technology underneath, but you don't necessarily know. Like the consumer has no idea that this technology is in play, but it's just providing value. It's just putting money back in their pocket. So the first question was related to DevOps and how to create a compliant DevOps essentially. So I think that's interesting. You may have to clarify your question, but are you saying can you create a compliant DevOps solution using blockchain?
Talk about when you talk about security issue, security should be programmed in beginning.
Right.
Rather than later. Otherwise, you got to patch and patch.
Right. Yeah. So it's got it. So essentially, if you need to create processes that allow on-chain upgradability for essentially governance. And so I think there is a huge opportunity for IT. Like I mentioned, there's projects that are being built that govern IT infrastructure and assist in the orchestration of that infrastructure using smart contracts. And so if you build upgradability into these contracts, you can create an environment that requires certain stakeholders to sign off on actions in the environment. And essentially, if you have like a succession strategy, you can allow those stakeholders to upgrade the rails that are in place. Does that answer your question? Cool. There's one. Yeah, for the right reasons. Sorry, what was that? Sure. So the question was, are these corporations that are adopting blockchain interested in public blockchain? And the answer is yes, for the right reasons. Like you really need to make sure you know what data you don't want to just publish data to the public blockchain in general, but there is certain data that makes sense. So for example, like compliance data. I think that there's a really obvious opportunity to publish compliance data on the public blockchain. For example, like traceability for CCPA or GDPR compliance. I think that's one really interesting opportunity. Anything that involves records that could be subpoenaed later makes a lot of sense. You don't want to publish personally identifiable information so that it's not just straightforward, hey, we're going to dump all this data on the public blockchain. But there are strategies to architect applications that do publish that data on the public blockchain. And, yes, they are interested.
Today, payment networks, right? The speed is the biggest issue.
Like the blockchain? Yeah, so that's kind of what I was hinting at with regards to just solid enterprise architecture. Like currently today, the banking system, speed it's really slow. It takes days for a transaction to post. On a public blockchain, depending on the network conditions, it takes a while to post. But it's much faster than the traditional banking system. So what I think what I think makes the most sense is user experience right? Is that it's kind of where you're going.
My question probably is related to credit card processing, for example, or equity fixed income derivatives clearing and settlement side.
Right.
The volume and the speed at which Visa processes the transactions.
Yeah.
Right. So from that standpoint.
absolutely. So I think that's kind of where the enterprise architecture comes in to kind of get out of the way, because a lot of applications in the past have that leverage blockchain have been like blocking, and essentially, you can't do anything until that transaction, has actually hit the chain. There are ways that very much resemble traditional banking today, that you can implement very high throughput transactions, million transactions a second throughput, no matter what the underlying chain is. If you, and it's very, think about how the banks today do like fraud detection. Like, so if you implement that correctly, you can have a million transactions per second throughput to the Bitcoin blockchain and have, a machine learning layer, like machine learning filter in front of it that essentially determines, makes its best judgment whether or not the transaction will actually finalize correctly. So there are ways. It's early days for that, but it's the throughput will eclipse Visa, and it does today, but not to finalization.
Hi, you mentioned the machine learning algorithm would be able to identify whether it's likely or not faster or whatever to clear. What features are we talking about that would be used in such algorithms?
That's a great question. We're still exploring that. Yeah, that's a great question.
So I'm a machine learning engineer, so I was really curious as to like what things can actually come out of these signals that are actually descriptive enough,
Right.
informative to capture these said patterns.
No, I think it's a discussion to have. Yeah, it's too early. We've been researching functionality to create a machine learning environment to build data models. We haven't built the data models.
I'm gonna ask you.
Yeah, we should talk.
Multiple. Oh, sorry. Thank you. Is there a case that your client is hiring multiple vendors for the blockchain technology suppliers and for like different system integration, and what would be the challenge in that case?
Sorry, I didn't hear the first part because I was doing that.
So suppose that, for example, your client ABC, they are hiring different firm to help them build up the blockchain systems. Mm-hmm. And when these different vendors integrate each other, is there any challenge on what would be the challenge?
When the vendors integrate each other, which vendors?
I mean, like if your client ABC has multiple systems, mm-hmm. System 1 mm-hmm. and was built by your firm, and system 2 was built by another vendor. And when these two systems need to integrate each other, and when both of the firms are using blockchain, mm-hmm. and what would be the challenge between integration?
So, okay. So, first of all, we're not a services firm, but so we probably wouldn't have built System A. But let's say that this company has two systems. The question is, company has two systems, and they're both using blockchain. How do we get the systems to talk essentially to the same ledger? Yeah. So essentially, the ledger itself, and it's a great question. So prior to the project we've been working on, you would have to hire a bunch of blockchain engineers that understand how to encode and decode, transaction ledgers. Specific to the chain that's in play, but essentially what we've created is something that you can use that's kind of agnostic to any blockchain and leverages modern programming languages that each firm will have resources already in place that understand. So like the value proposition is leverage blockchain, but leverage it with your existing technology stack, with your existing team. And so the challenge would simply be, at that point, it's kind of an application architecture discussion. It's like, what data do we need to store? It's actually like, it gets you to the discussion about how are we actually using blockchain? and which is the discussion that we need to be having, because it's how the hype will go away, is when there's applications that are actually using it. But I think there's solutions that are coming that really eliminate all of the challenges, the technical challenges to getting systems to actually talk to blockchain. Did that answer your question? Okay. Okay. And we're done. Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me.